Okay, good morning. My goal today is to cover lighting and different types of lighting for the landscape. This applies not only to landscape, but figures or still life or anything that you're doing really. So I have a whole segment that I teach on lighting. So I just pulled some things out of that lesson that have more to do with lighting the landscape and learning a little bit about temperature, and I've relied on some photography websites. So that's going to be the first thing that we cover. And there'll be a few sketching exercises if you want to sketch your notes out, if you want to sketch some of these diagrams. I will also send you the notes, but in my experience, if I send them to you, you'll likely just file them away somewhere in the middle of fixing lunch or something. So it helps for me to take notes at the moment because oftentimes I don't get back to them. So lighting is what we'll cover first. Then we will move into drawing and painting trees. So a reminder that landscape study covers a lot of things: skies, clouds, mountains, grass, buildings, trees, lighting. So we're just sticking our toes in the edge of the water on this. There's so much to learn about landscapes. So I'm not covering this completely. Please know that we're just jumping in and we're describing what we can today. We will begin with the three basic parts of a tree, or the three basic steps, and we'll cover those. And that is the shape of the tree. We're going to learn and draw some basic 8 shapes of the basic forms of trees. Then we're going to move into the value of the overall tree, getting the form of it. And then the third step is texture. So that's my plan. The very last thing I'm going to do is show you a couple of landscape paintings that I think would be good old master studies for the next few weeks, and let you give me some feedback on what you would like to do. So I've narrowed those down to 2, and we'll look at those and talk about those the last 10 minutes of class. So I'll also send that out this afternoon in my recap, so you can send me your feedback. I know some of you have to log off early, so I want you to be able to give me your feedback on what you would like to do. They're very similar. They include trees. One includes water. So let me share the screen and just tell you, I didn't really prepare an inspirational segment today, but I do have a little, I'll find it here in just a moment. I have a little drawing that I did of trees, and it was a little daily devotion out of one of my little daily readers. I think it was a recovery book, and it's a quote by a person named Willa Cather. She says, "I like trees because they seem more resigned to the way they have to live than other things do. If a tree's soil becomes dry or low in valuable minerals, it can't pull up its roots and move to a better place. Instead, the tree spreads its roots deeper and wider, seeking fertile ground. It makes the surrounding soil richer by dropping dead branches and leaves to mulch the ground below. It remains firm in the wind, bends but doesn't break under the weight of ice and snow, and gives shade, shelter, and nourishment to the ground below. Beginning tonight, if we think of ourselves, or today, if we think of ourselves as trees firmly placed, we can learn to be more accepting of our surroundings. We can learn to grow no matter how difficult it may seem. Such growth can enrich our lives and make us stronger, so we don't break with the weight of problems or difficulties. We too can be as strong and enduring as trees." And then the little encouragement says, "I can learn to move with the winds of change and bend with the weight of difficulties and still stand tall and firm." I've just always been a lover of words and quotes, and I just always want to capture them just like I do images. And so this was a a quick little tree that I saw it on something, so I didn't make it up out of my head, but it didn't take me long to do this, and I did it in pencil, and then I used an ink. Denise, jump in there.
Can you send that to us?
Yes, I'll post it on the Facebook page, and I'll also include it in my recap. Hi, Carol. Good morning. So happy you're here. She's off the boat dock this week. She's back on dry land. You've got you're muted, and that's fine. And we're staying muted unless you want to talk. Just unmute yourself. The little microphone down for me on the desktop is down at the bottom. There she goes.
I have 3 dogs in the room.
Oh. I understand.
So, be quiet.
I understand. So happy you're here. So I try to start off with a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of something to encourage us, because again, I know these days are challenging, trying to make it in quarantine and with all the different things that are going on around us, just making the best. And I say this in lots of classes, but artists are some of the most well-adjusted people, believe it or not, because we are constantly problem solving, constantly. If you're going to do any kind of art, drawing, painting, then you have to problem solve. And sometimes 100 problems in one painting. So the more you do that, the better you become at life, I think. It's just good for us. So I'm going to start off with my lighting segment. So let me change to a different PowerPoint here. But I get so excited about what I'm learning in art. And every time I cover a new subject, I'm learning something new. We kind of covered the last segment fast. And I wanted to just run back through it for just a minute. These were the last segments that I didn't really have time to cover in depth, and they were the use of line weight as far as telling the depth story. So if you're just using pencil and you're trying to tell a landscape story, then your line weight is your best friend, because anything that is sharp and dark and contrasty is going to come forward, and your light lines are going to recede into the background. So this image is in the worksheets that I sent you last week, and this is a great one to sketch in your sketchbook and make a few notes about if you didn't get to do that last week. This is by a book by Barrington Barber called The Complete Book on Drawing. It's one of those you can get in the bargain bin at a bookstore that my mom had, and it has some great, some of them aren't so great, but it's got some really good illustrations in it. So I have another illustration that I use a lot. This one is, let me make it a little smaller because you're not seeing the whole thing. There we go. This first one of the coffee cups is from Juliet Aristides, a wonderful, wonderful teacher. She has a atelier in Washington or Seattle, I think. But the two cups with equal line weight sort of attach themselves to each other, and they look like they're on the same plane. But when you look at these cups that have, the front of this cup has a thicker line, it obviously comes forward, and the back of the cup with the light line goes backwards. So I feel like these are important things to think about, because even as you do your quick rough draft, if you focus and make the lines sharper and thicker, they're going to come forward in your drawing. And we're going to talk about doing that in paint as well. This was another image from James Gurney. If you don't follow him on Instagram or Facebook, he is a wonderful artist and teacher, and he posts a lot of instructional images, and he's just fun. He does a lot of watercolor sketching in his sketchbook, and you would just love him. He has lots of freebie videos on YouTube. James Gurney, Gurney. And this one, he's just reversing. He's showing you how the thicker line on the outside comes forward, and the smaller little window C thin kind of goes back. And when you reverse it, how the opposite is. So I'm not sure exactly what he's trying to illustrate there, but you do see the difference. Actually, with these 3 cubes on top, you see how the front one is very heavy and thick, and then it's medium, and then it's thin. And the size and the line weight help push those items back into the distance. And this, you guys may already know this, but it's always worth reminding and looking at again when you're using a pencil. This is another one in Juliet's book that shows you these light lines that are less detailed, how your eye skips right over them and has this hierarchy of order here to the darkest darks. And so the center plane of this drawing is the focal point, and it's easy to read that because of the line weight and the heaviness. Here again in paint, this is from Proco. If you don't follow him on YouTube, you should, on drawing and painting, but he is amazing, and he has lots and lots of free videos. But you see how the texture, but a lighter, more less saturated version pushes in the background, and then the sharp, saturated, high contrast paint comes forward. And even more so when you get rid of the texture on the bottom image, how it really pushes back into the background. So this is an important element to think about in your landscapes and how you want to show the depth story. Because a lot of times you come back from like a vacation and you've taken some beautiful pictures and you're like, oh, I can't wait, to get home and put those up on the monitor and look at them. And a lot of times, I don't know about you, but I'm disappointed because the pictures don't look as beautiful as the place where I stood and looked at it. A lot of times just your regular point and shoot camera, your phone, it's going to make everything sharp and crisp. And you're not going to have any soft muted colors in the background unless it's a really foggy, thick atmosphere kind of day. And plein air painters, Paula can attest to this, prefer a little bit of atmosphere to help tell that depth story. But once you've painted enough landscapes and learned about the atmosphere, then you're able to make those adjustments on your own, whether it's clear or whether it's, is there a word for that, Paula? Anybody that knows, jump in. Some of you I know are landscape painters. Is there a word for those kind of days that are most preferred? Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I do. You've heard that though before, that it's probably, but here's a day like I'm talking about.
There's a lot to learn about it, but getting the atmosphere is something you really strive for out when you're plein air painting.
Yeah, and like I've got this picture down here of that my pastor took, and it's a beautiful picture, but look how crisp and sharp everything is. So if I painted this like I see it, there would be no feeling of depth in the painting. And so a lot of times when we come back from vacation, this is how our pictures look. The shadows are black. There's no depth to them. There's no interest to them. And if you paint that, you're going to struggle with it. It's not going to be a good painting. So that's why it's so important to get outside, heighten your sense of observation and take notes. Even if you're not comfortable painting outside, go out there and take notes. That's what most plein air painters do. They take a little small canvas and they make color notes. And it's not a finished painting, but they've put all the colors that they see while they're there, so that when they go back with their photograph, they can adjust what they see in the photograph that's reading black or reading too sharp. So I did want to say a word about that. Then we kind of flipped through some paintings that really help give you that sense of depth. The fence posts lead you in to this one. Back, it is obvious that a big spot of red is always going to be your focal point and take you back in. There again, another red barn, and the items are sort of overlapped. So that's another way to create depth instead of putting everything on the same plane. If you overlap items, it helps step. Same if you lay things on a table, a still life arrangement. You don't necessarily want to line them all up. You want to have light and shadows going in between the objects and moving the eye inward through the painting. So these are important things. This one I mentioned 3 planes. There's the foreground with the grass. There's the midground, which is the lit segment, the focal point with the hay and the workers. And then there's the trees and sky. So you've got three different planes in your painting to help tell that depth story. Same with this one. All of these have at least the 3 depth of field segments, fields of depth. I always get those mixed up. Which one is it? Depth of field, fields of depth. Y'all can correct me, believe me. This one by Edgar Payne also shows that and tells that story really well. You've got the foreground here with the grass, then you've got the trees, and then you've got the mountains and the sky in the distance. And so you see that these areas in the foreground are really warm, and they come forward, and the cooler it gets, the more it pushes your objects into the background. This was also in your notes that I sent, PDF notes that I sent. I think there were 22 pages of notes. If you wanted to sketch this in your sketchbook and just show the value shifts, how objects fade based on value. And I do have a whole folder full of landscape paintings that are done with a shadow in the foreground. I've taken a handful of landscape classes, but the classes I took, they didn't talk a lot about composition. They just kind of took you out and you painted, and they showed you how to lay it in, but I didn't learn a whole lot about composition. So I've had to study paintings on my own and dig around to try to learn some of this. So my question was, is there a rule about putting a big shadow in the front of your painting? And I couldn't find an answer about that, but I have a whole folder of about 15 beautiful paintings that have a shadow in the front. And so that is one way, as long as that shadow is not so dark and imposing that it acts as a wall and blocks the viewer out, that, I believe you can do whatever you want with it. But I believe it's a nice tactic, and it works really, really well. So what I want to cover now in this segment is lighting, because I believe this is just as important as the composition, is what time of day you're painting, how you set your scenes up, and just looking at the different possibilities for lighting, because this is something we don't think about a lot of times. And I guess my best example, I'm going to go to the very end here and show you some images. This is a photograph of an iris from a Burpee catalog, okay, on the left. This is one that I took outside at about 6 o'clock, laying down on the ground. Can you obviously see the difference in these two and how important lighting is? When I first started painting, I tried a couple of flower paintings, and I would just get a magazine and flip through. I didn't go outside and take pictures myself. Or if I did, I went outside at noon and I took a picture like this, and I tried to paint from this. And what do you think happened? With no shadows, what usually happens? Flat. I think I've read Norma's lips. Flat as a flitter. It was a good drawing. The colors were pretty, but it was like a caricature or a cartoon or a coloring book. It was just flat, and it was okay. It was not bad. But when I started learning more about photography and trying to get better photos for myself, because you can look around and you won't find a lot of pictures like this. This was with my good Canon camera, but it wasn't a real tricky thing. You can do this with your phone. If you have a pretty good camera on your phone. I got the light behind it. It's backlit so that there's light coming through the petals, and there's shadow and light, and there's a glow to it. Here's another one. And I did take this one in the middle of the day of the same irises. These were my Aunt High. She lived up in Galton. And these were her irises at my house that I inherited from her. And I took this one late in the afternoon at the golden hour. Which would you prefer to paint from? So this is my best example to you of how important lighting is. You can still do a good painting from this. Don't get me wrong. You can do a painting that's different, that could be more for illustration purposes. I want to be more dramatic. I'm a I guess you would say high key painter or low key painter. People call those different things, but I like to punch it. I like to have drama in there. I like to have lights and darks and beautiful colors in between. So I wanted to show you those two and then talk just a little bit about the landscape and how to light it. And you see I have a lot of images, so I'm going to move through these kind of quick. This is the first one that you might go ahead and sketch in your sketchbook. Doesn't have to be color. It can just be the 5. Let me see. I thought I put numbers on them. I don't see them now. If you started with the hands of the clock at noon, this would be the sun coming from behind the tree. And then what does it do? It just puts a shadow, or maybe kind of straight over the top of the tree, really, not behind it, straight over the top. So what you have is you have light on the head, and then you have a bit of a shadow underneath the base of the tree. Not my favorite type of lighting. Noontime tends to be the hottest part of the day, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. It washes out all the color. So if you're on vacation and you take pictures and it happens to be noontime, they're probably not going to be the most beautiful pictures that you take. So once you learn a little bit more about times of day and temperature of light, you can plan your trips. You can plan your sessions where you go out and paint or where you go out and take photographs. So noontime, right here at 12 o'clock, you've got a little short shadow. If I'm doing a portrait of somebody and the light's hitting the top of their head, then they're going to have dark circles under their eyes and a dark circle under their nose, a dark circle under their lip. It's not going to be real flattering. It's almost like if I lit a portrait from underneath, I'm going to have dark places here, dark places here and under the nose. Oh, no, on the top. And it's not flattering. It's not very flattering light. So I prefer to have side light for the most part. And on the landscape, we'll notice that as the light goes down, it gets warmer and more golden. So we're going to look at that in just a second. So 12 o'clock. So 1 o'clock, the light is coming from upper left, and it throws a shadow to the right. And when you're shading your tree or your subject, you're going to have light, medium in the center, and shadow on the right. Your overall tree shape is going to have a distinct light, medium, and dark. And again, I'm going to send you these in your worksheets as well. So if you don't get them all drawn, and these just need to be simple elementary drawings. They don't have to be any kind of masterpieces. The third lighting source example is backlit. So this would have to happen late in the day or early in the morning, and the sun is close to the horizon. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a nice rim. It doesn't show it really well on this picture, but you might leave a rim around the edge of this tree because it's going to leave you some pretty glowy rim light. It's going to throw the shadow into the front. And this is a good way to work sometimes, especially if you're doing trees. And we're going to see some examples of those in a minute. So that's number 3. Number 4 is a cloudy day where there's no sun at all. And so you really are going to have very few shadows. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to make each object look dimensional because, as artists, we need a light, medium, and dark on our objects to make them pop and come forward. So this 4th way of lighting is probably, it's common for plein air painters because they don't want real strong sunlight, but is a little bit more challenging when your light source is kind of just all over even. It's like out in the studio, if I turned on all the lights and all the windows were open, there would just be light coming from everywhere. So I wouldn't really have any shadows to help me tell the story. You can still paint that way, but it's a little more challenging. And then this 5th example is one of my favorites. It's the golden hour when the sun is all the way on the horizon and it is lit from the side. So you have light, medium, dark, and then it throws your shadow off to the right. This is the most common way we light things, again, because we read from left to right. a lot of times artists will, whatever they're working on, be it a portrait, a landscape, a still life, they'll make a little sphere like this. They'll either put it on the bottom of their canvas, or they'll do a little piece of paper and they'll make a sphere and they'll light it with the way the light, if the light's coming from this way, they'll shade it real quick. Daryl Steele did this for us when we were with the program that we did. And he said that's a really good thing to do, is to put a little sphere to remind you throughout your whole project of your light source, because you start getting in there painting like crazy and you're not thinking about your light source, you're gonna forget, and it's gonna deter your painting. So this is a really good exercise to train yourself to do. Did y'all get enough time to kind of jot those down? I don't want to move too fast. All right, the next one, I just isolated this one because I felt like this is one of my favorite ways of lighting. I light a lot of my portraits this way. Some would call it Rembrandt lighting, chiaroscuro lighting, which is a dramatic light source when with your object kind of raised up as focal point in a more noble setting. Again, it's not a rule. You can light it however you want to. There's another source of lighting that I forgot to include, and it's called Zorn lighting. And that is where you have light sources from two sides, and you have a shadow down the center. So if you want to jot that down and do a little bit of research, I don't know if that applies to landscape, so I didn't include it here, but I know that Zorn lit his subjects from two sides sometimes, and it's tricky. One side will probably be a little bit lighter, the other side not quite as strong of a light, but having shadow down the center of your object can be a little challenging. This next image is one of my favorites, and I'm going to add it to the worksheets. I don't have it in there right yet. I had to go hunt for all these things because I had them in different places, but this was a little photography example that I found years ago, and it's called 7 Hours of Light. And I just want you to look at the difference in the temperature of light throughout the day. It may not always be this strong. This may be an exaggeration. But look how typically, this is what I've observed on many days. The light is very cool in the morning. As you go through the day, I would say this one probably is noontime. It gets washed out noon again, especially if you have a bluebird day. It's almost all your light places on a flower or on a person are just white. There's no color. And we're going to look at that again in a minute. We're going to look at the Kelvin temperature of light, which gets kind of tricky, but I think it's good for us to look at and try to make it. This one gets kind of greenish, and then look how orange it gets right at sundown. Really, really yellowish and then orange. And then it starts to get bluer again as it goes down to dark. So, you know, a night sky that's a blue sky will be really bluish. So it starts to cool off again. So, you know, who knew there were so many different things happening throughout the day? I notice it when I'm videoing demos for class because I have my shades open in the studio, and I'm not always using north light because I'm trying to video and use my monitor. So I'm using east light after the sun has passed over, so there's not direct sun coming in. But I do notice how my canvas changes color in the videos, and it's hard for me to match it. And it's something you wouldn't notice, except that I'm taking pictures and I'm videoing for you guys, and then I'm like, wow, look how blue that is. And by the afternoon, it changes color throughout the day. So here is the same example with the Kelvin temperature of light. The only time I've ever really noticed this is when I go to the store to buy light bulbs. And you'll notice, and I'll send you this example as well, but you'll notice that they have a temperature, a Kelvin number on the light bulb. And so you wonder, what does that mean? What do I need as an artist for my studio? And what am I looking for when I'm painting? Do I want a cool bulb? Do I want a warm bulb? And you guys that have been in the studio know that in my fluorescent lights, which is not my favorite type of lighting, but the most reasonable for a big studio like mine, is I have a warm bulb that is down here in a 3,000, I think it's 4,000. And then I have a cool bulb that's 6,500. So when you look up at my light fixtures, you see a blue one and a yellow one. Those balance, and they bring me somewhere in the middle. Here's another. I'm going to go back to that one, but that one doesn't show it exactly. Notice down here in the lightest part, it's almost white light. It doesn't throw a blue tint on my painting, and it doesn't throw a yellow tint on my painting. They mix together and they give me sort of just a white. So if you go in there and you want to just buy a bulb, and again, we're not talking about working in the studio, but it is important because this applies to your landscapes. You might want to get like a 5,000 or 4,000, I guess. They say 4,000 is perfect here because that's in between yellow and in between blue. So 4,000 is neither one or the other. Let me go back to this one again. The way I remember this, because I get so confused whenever you throw numbers at me. My brain is not a number brain. It's a word brain and a picture brain. 1,000 down by the ground is the sunset. And that helps me remember. And as the numbers go up to the sky, higher and higher, they get bluer and bluer, like the blue sky. So that helps me remember when I'm trying to think about numbers. So the lower the number, the more orange it is, like the low sun on the sunset. The higher it is, the bluer it gets. A lot of these new LED lights that you buy, wonderfully economic. They're supposed to last us for 20 years, but they're very cold. They're blue. They're up here in this number. And I bought some and put them in the kitchen, and they had 2 settings on them, thankfully, because when I turned them on, they made my kitchen blue and cold. And my mom always had little warm lights on in the evening, and it made the house look cozy. And so when I turn those lights on, they're under my sink. They're under my cabinets. I always turn the warm setting on because it feels cozier and warmer. This light down here in Mark's studio is a warm light. So you can tell by looking at each of us on the monitor too. Norma has a little bit of cool light on her. I don't know if you have a light bulb or a window by you. You have a light above you and then you have a window too. I'm reading your lips. Boy, I'm getting good at this lip reading. Yeah, so it depends. And so if you're sitting by a north window, you're going to get cool light. If there's something outside your window that's shining in, it could be throwing blue light on you. So again, I'm not saying memorize all these things by any means, but each time we talk about them, it makes us more familiar. It makes you start looking to try to determine what temperature is the light. If I'm at an open studio session and I'm painting a model, I usually will go over to the spotlight and look at the light bulb before we get started to see, is it a warm, just a regular tungsten light bulb like we used to use back in the old days, is very yellow. And then as they move up, sometimes they're even blue. The bulb itself will be blue. And that will give me an idea before I even start my painting of what kind of lights are going to be on my model. Are they going to be yellowish lights, or are they going to have a little bit of blue in them? Is this helping? Is it confusing to you? It's not too confusing. It helps. I think it's very important because people would just say, oh, paint this color. Oh, paint that color. But they didn't explain to me why. I want to know why. What are you thinking? How do you make those decisions? Don't just come around and fix my painting and tell me that was wrong. Tell me how you saw that and what difference it made. This particular time, I looked a little bit more because I wanted to find out the answer to the question, is it always cool in the morning and warm in the evening? And so I went to a photography website. Well, this was way over my head. I'll just tell you. it started talking about a word called, let's see if I got it. This image, I forget. There's a whole terminology for it, and I didn't even copy it because I didn't want to muddy the water here. But let me read you this quote in the red. It says, in almost all photography, it's the quality of light that makes or breaks the shot. For professional photographers, chasing the light, waiting for it, sometimes helping it, and finally capturing it is a constant preoccupation, and for some, an obsession. So photographers, we are not photographers, but our shot, our image that we are working from is of utmost importance. And you all know, if you've tried to paint from a bad photo, raise your hand if you've ever painted from a bad photo. You know how hard it is. And so the more you train yourself, and you can even take a bad photo sometimes, once you learn more about light temperature and light sources, you can learn and you can make the changes yourself by pushing little things in your photo to make them even better. So here's what this website, and this is photopills.com if you're interested in going there, and it's pretty in depth, I'll tell you, but it's interesting. They start talking about temperature as it gets from golden hour to dark. And so you can see a little bit about the degrees. There's a blue hour that I didn't know happened. And you kind of see the blue hour. Let me go back to this one. You see this starting to get blue again after the sun goes down. So I believe in a simplified version, that's what they're talking about. And then it gets more purple before it gets pitch dark. Let's go back and look at this one again. So yeah, you can see that this starts to blue up with the orange, and then it definitely gets more purple as it goes towards dark. This was interesting to me. This is the first time I've found these last two images, but I think it's helpful to know that there's different things going on with the temperature. So how does that apply to your painting? Well, if you know your light coming in is very warm, then many of your lights, if you're out, they're going to be like yellowish green in the landscape. So if all your lights are really yellowish green, let me show you this next image. That's not the one I want to show you. Hold on. Well, darn, I'll go back. So if most of your landscapes in this yellowish green area, right in here, then you'll want to look for in the shadows these reddish purple colors, because they're going to be very beautiful. And if you really know your color wheel, you're going to look at those shadows and you're going to actually see some of these colors. For instance, these are done in the analogous color wheel, which is something different. I don't want to confuse you, but you are going to see some of those colors in your shadows. If you're outside and you're in this area and you're seeing, like, you're painting like Canadian spruces or a blue-green landscape like this, you're going to look for oranges in your shadow colors. Dark, they're going to be really dark. They're going to be kind of brownish, brown-greenish, but you're going to see those in the shadows. So when you know that and you know your light source, it makes a world of difference in just using your color wheel to think about what might be in the shadows. We have most trouble with figuring out shadow colors, usually. And a lot of times we just put brown in there. Well, you don't want just brown in all your paintings. It just looks like a bunch of dirt got thrown in there. So you want to use the color wheel to try to put some interesting colors in your shadows. They'll go brownish, but they'll be reddish brownish or orangish brownish. These next three slides are from a video that I have that we used in class a few years ago by John Potoshnik. Wonderful video. It was about 6 hours long, so we watched about an hour of it each week after class while we ate our lunch. He really uses the color wheel, and he does a lot of preparation before he does his landscape paintings. He's the one that builds the little white house out of foam core and then looks at how the light shines on the different planes of that house. A lot of trouble. He's a scientific mind. Not many of us are like that, but we can take bits and pieces. So he's using 3 color schemes on the same house. And these are analogous. These are colors that are side by side on the color wheel. The first one is yellow, orange, and orange. And he does the whole thing in analogous colors. The next one is blue-green, blue-green, blue, and blue-violet. These 3 color schemes. And they're okay. They're, if you have a bad picture and you don't know what color to paint it, you could try these things. He does these little teeny tiny quick studies before he starts a painting. And then this one is the analogous colors of yellow-green, green, blue-green, blue, and blue-violet. So he uses all these on this side and makes the whole painting in analogous colors. Interesting, huh? Now, he's got his light source. He knows where his light source is coming from. And I guess, it's not a strong, it's coming this way. So you got the light plane of the house, medium, dark under the shadows. So you get your values right and you use the color wheel and you can make some interesting studies that way. On the video, this was the video that we watched and that I have. He does this beautiful painting, and he calls it a quadratic. I couldn't find these. I had to screenshot these images and pull these together and make this image. I have JPEGs of all these, and I'll post these on the Facebook page. So you can use some of these slides if you're interested. I'll make a little album with all these slides in it. He uses what he calls a quadratic or a square color scheme. So you'll notice he's using the yellow-green, and he's using some reds that are in the red-violet. And then he's using the blue sky. You can't see the whole painting in here. And then orange tones all throughout here. So he's using the 4 colors in his painting. Just something to think about. Here's the triadic color scheme, where this painting uses orange, green, and purple. And it's interesting. It's fun. So you'll see when you see a color wheel. Let's see, I have one somewhere. I'll show you later. You'll see in the middle of your color wheel, if you buy one of those little cardboard ones, it'll show you the triangle and the square and the rectangle, and then the complements using what's across. So those are things that you can, again, develop and use later in your paintings if you choose to. All right, let me move us on here. I got a lot of things to show y'all. All right, I wanted to say a little bit about lighting again, and I spent some time last night because I went to see this movie with my dad a year or 2 ago whenever it came out, The Revenant. It was pretty intense. But one of the things I remember reading after that movie is that the cinematographer, Lubetsky, shot only with natural light, only a few hours every day. It took them 80 days over 9 months to film this movie, which doesn't sound like that long, but he only filmed the scenes during the golden hour, during a certain time of day when the lighting was right. Now, is that dedication or what? And I wanted to show you a few other images from the movie. He said the idea of using natural light came because we wanted the audience to feel, I hope, that this stuff is really happening, that it's real life. And since I've become, well, here's the other thing. Natural light is very complex because it's constantly changing, which of course is a problem for continuity, but it's beautiful. And that constant transformation of nature is a theme of the movie. I think if you're going to be an outdoor painter, you have to deal with light. You have to educate yourself on light if that's something you love. If you're going to be any kind of a painter, lighting is very important. It'll make or break your paintings. So here's a few more images from this movie. And notice that warmth, how that warmth just comes forward and the cool tones go back. And just the beautiful, there's complementary colors right there, blue and orange. Same back here. You don't have any blue in this one. It's all candle lit candlelight is almost always throws orange everywhere. But notice on this one how his warmth of his face, even though it's not a dramatically lit scene, it's the warmth of his face against this blue sky is so stunning. Here's another image I found from the movie The Notebook that was filmed with natural light. And it's beautiful. There's not any strong shadows because there's a canopy of trees overhead. But some of my best pictures, I post a lot of photos of my granddaughter lately. Sorry, you guys, I know I wear y'all out with that. But one of my favorite places is under my grape arbor because you have a canopy of cool, and then light comes in from the side and gives some beautiful dappled light on the sides of the face. Another of my favorite things to watch is PBS. PBS has some beautifully filmed shows. This is Poldark. I could sit and watch every scene of Poldark and do a painting from it because of the way it's lit. And I couldn't find very many images of it. So nobody's captured the images, but it's beautifully lit. There's lots of candlelight scenes. Her hair and the color of the turquoise that they put her in. You know, directors go to a lot of trouble to set these scenes up. And we sit there and watch them and we have no idea what all goes into that. Well, it's the same for an artist. You know, people go by and they look at your painting. Oh, that's really cute. That's pretty. But they have no idea the work that went into setting it up and planning and making a good composition and lighting it well. Another of my favorites is The Durrells of Corfu. I don't know if anybody watches that. If you haven't, look it up on Netflix. It is just delightful. Every scene is like a painting. And it's just a wonderful show, and it makes you want to paint when you watch it. You're like, give me some paints. Let me get my colors out. Let me get the palette knife going. This is an old movie that somebody let me borrow a few years ago called Lust for Life about Vincent van Gogh. Kirk Douglas is in it. It's old, so it has that old, you know, the not as sharp and crisp as what we're used to seeing now, but almost every scene in it is a painting. It's beautifully done. Manelli was the director that did this, and I'm not a film buff, so I may have that wrong, but I believe his name was Manelli. Beautifully lit, beautiful show. All right, let's look at a few paintings real quickly and look at some lighting situations in them. Here is a gray, foggy, overcast day, mostly cool and blue, and the reflections are very warm and lit. It has the beautiful sense of depth because the background is very soft and muted, and the foreground is a little stronger, especially your eye goes right here to these warm tail lights. This is by Ken Auster. Can you tell what time of day this is? Do you think it's morning, noon, evening? Somebody chime in there and tell me what you think.
Evening.
You think it's evening? What about you, Carol? You're muted. I couldn't tell you. Morning?
Or earlier.
It is either morning or evening because the shadows are long. Okay, so that's something to pay attention to. You know, the light's coming in from the side. It feels more like morning because it's so cool. I don't know, but I think it's probably morning because it seems very cool. If you'll notice, when the light's cool, like here, it's bluish, it's yellowish over here. This may be a really yellow sign, but it's very cool. You'll notice that a lot of the shadows have warm tones in them. They're still cool in the shadows some, but they're really warm. So I've had many teachers tell me when you have a warm light source, look for more cools in the shadow. If you have a cool light source, look for more warms in the shadow. There'll be both, but predominantly it's usually contrasting. So that's another thing to think about. Morning or evening, you think? evening, probably golden hour. You can see how really gold and warm and yellow the light is. And then look how blue all the shadows are. Yellowish light would make a more of a purplish blue shadow. You can test this out by taking a white paper bag and shining a warm incandescent yellow light on it. And I guarantee you're going to see some bluish purple in the bag. Even if there's no bluish purple in that white bag, crunch the bag up a little bit so that you've got planes on it. Gail LeVay does this in some of her classes. She has students draw a white bag and then look for the values in it. Take a cool light bulb, a bluish light bulb, and throw that blue light in it. And I guarantee you're going to see some orangish warm tones in the shadows. Crazy how those come, but they're there if you pay attention. What about this one? What do you think the light source is here? Is it warm or cool? It's kind of hard to tell. It's cool over here and it's warm here. It feels more like morning to me in this one. I don't know. It just feels that way. So if you can try to tell the story of whether it's a warm or cool time of day, whether it's morning or evening, I think that's helpful. Morning, it just feels like morning because people are out getting ready for work and stuff is out. There's activity. There's a bicycle. Here's another one. I'm going to move through these kind of quick because I'm trying to stay on my little schedule I made. This is Andre Lucero, Lucero. I should have put their name on here. He posts his paintings with the scene, and I love that. Typically, an artist will paint throughout the day and then take a picture at the end. So the lighting has usually changed. But you can see how he translated some of the light here. This is not yellow like this on the sidewalk. The tops to the fence post. This looks almost pure white and like a cold light. But look how warm he made it. Maybe it's just reading like that for the camera. I don't know. But you can see how he made it glowier. I like this example too. This is another one by Lucero. Let me zoom it in a little bit so you can see it more. He pushed his values here. And the light is very cool on the top of this log cabin. It's probably because it's gray, but the blue sky is above. And it's a cooler time of the day. There's some cool tones. There's some bluish tones in the grass down here. Let me zoom in even more on this painting so you can see it. It blurs a little bit. But see the blues in the grass, in the shadows, because of the blue sky overhead. So always think about what's reflecting into your objects. There's real warm yellow here on these hay bales, and he bumped that up a lot. Look at the purples back here. Let me zoom back out again. It looks just like gray to me. But because I see purple now that I see purple in his paintings, that you don't want to just paint that gray, it'll be dull and lifeless. So he put some really beautiful purple tones in these branches back here in the background. Just much more interesting. Look under the, where the hay bales are. Look at the color he put. And this is just a quick study. Look at the color he put under the roof here. It's a real... He's got yellow here. Well, it's almost a purplish color, but it's got warmth glow. It's like an orangey purple in there. It's interesting. More interesting than if he just made it black, dark brown or dark. This is a dark purple under here. So again, looking at the temperature of your surrounding items is important. Let me zoom back out on this. This is a figure and a landscape, but it's got some strong rim light on it. And I think that's very beautiful to use rim light. Norma's doing some of that in the painting you're working on right now, Norma. It's challenging because if you're sitting there with your nose on it, smelling the painting, and you put that rim light on, you're going to smooth it all out because it's going to look too chunky to you. But if you move back across the room and you look at it, like, let's zoom in on this for a second. Look at some of his strokes. Well, I can't zoom in on it too close, but these are just separate strokes of light along the rim here. And when you move back, it's just stunning. It's really beautiful. Of course, Gerhardt's is a master of rim light. He is so, so good at this. And his paintings are so beautiful. This is, now whether he got out there late every day, you know, you're going to have a sunset like that one time. So he had to have done some photographs. I've also learned that if you will video a little clip of the scene, sometimes the colors and the images are more beautiful than your photograph in the video. So do both, because you have your camera, you have your phone right there with you. So take a photograph, take a little video clip of it as well, and you can capture. Most likely, he sat out there and he recorded those colors when that was like that. And he's done enough of these paintings that he could translate what he sees into beautiful light. But if you'll look on my YouTube channel, I think I have these bookmarked. He shows himself outside painting. A lot of times he paints his daughters, and he's outside with the paint stuff with the little girl out there posing. So there's nothing that replaces working from life. Look at his cool tones back here. It pushes these, instead of just putting gray, they're beautiful blue tones. This looks like almost like fire around her head. It's so, so brilliant and bright. Just individual strong strokes. Here's another backlit one. I don't know the painter for this. Sometimes I can find the name of the painter to give credit, and sometimes I can't. But you notice this blue-green in the background, and it gets warmer and yellower around the focal point because a warmer color typically comes forward. So these, and you have a sense of depth because you have these little grasses here. Then you have her in the water, focal point. And then you have a little bit of sky and the trees in the background. So you have at least 3 or 4 areas of depth in this one. This is another of Gerhardt's paintings. It's hard to find an image of this that was a very good quality. I saw this painting years ago. I thought it was Richard Schmidt. And when I went to look for it, I found out that it was Dan Gerhardt's. This probably changed my whole way of looking at outdoor scenes, because I noticed that if I had sat down and got my paints out to paint a winter scene of the woods like this, I would have gotten white, raw umber, and then some skin tone colors out. I would have painted the most dreary brown painting of the woods that you have ever seen. And when I saw this painting and I looked at the lavenders and this little bit of a alizarin color in here, and then over here in the full painting, you see mossy green colors. You see some blue, almost phthalo blue down here. You see orange tones. If we could see this painting in real life, you would see the real colors. But there's burnt sienna colors in here. There's raw sienna colors. There's all kinds of, look at this peachy tone over here. It's not just a brown and white painting. And so when you're sitting out there looking at a landscape, it's your job as the painter to see a little nuance and to bump that up a couple of degrees and make it more interesting. We're not the photographer. We're not trying to copy the general color we see. At first, maybe you mass in the general tone, but your job is to push the color, bump it, make it more beautiful and more interesting. Anyway, this was probably, there will be paintings that are life changers for you, that make a stamp in your mind and change your way of painting. And this was one for me. Here's another one by, I believe it's Gerhardt's. Obviously, what time of day is it? I know everybody's muted. Golden hour.
Oh.
because you see that warm light coming in from the side, orange, bright orange. You see the orange right here on his shirt. You see the orange on the water, and you see the opposite, the blue colors. So this salmon orange and this cerulean blue are very beautiful together because they're complements. So very lovely painting. A couple more I'm going to go through kind of quick. Another gear hearts, two more gear hearts. This one has that crisp feel of the Russian painters. If you've ever seen a Russian exhibit, they're just, the air over in Russia and Alaska, it's got to be so crisp and clean. And that's really captured in this painting. Maybe it's morning. I don't know. It just feels stunning. It's really a lot of cool light, but there's warm, glowy tones to it as well. This one, absolutely sunset, late, probably late in the evening. You see all the warm tones on it. Another Gear Hearts sunset picture, and you see the rim light. And if you zoom in, I'll encourage you to go on YouTube and look for some Gear Hearts video clips, because he'll zoom in on these paintings and show you how thick that paint is. It's very, very effective and very beautiful. This is Susan Lyons, who's married to Scott Burdick. And this is a really beautiful glowy. It's not really a landscape, but look at the colors she put in the landscape back here. Just stunning. All kinds of warm and cools. Look at the cools on the horse, the blues and greens, and look at this glowy peachy color underneath the horse. It's not just a brown and white horse. So we're always on this quest to see color and bump it up. Does everybody want to look at this ridge between the light, warm light? Look at this blue tone she put right in between it. Is that crazy? Different. It's different. It's interesting. Then there's a nighttime painting. This is by Potoshnik again. Potoshnik. I had the name of this written down. Murphy's Grocery, I think, is what he has on it. Has anybody ever painted at nighttime? Paula, have you done any out? No,
I haven't.
You haven't.
No.
There is.
No.
I have this on the Facebook page, I think, but Streamline Art Videos, that they sell videos, but they've been showing during the pandemic a free segment of all of their videos. They'll show like 45 minutes of a 5-hour video, and then they'll have an interview with the artist. Those are on Facebook. You can watch those free. Every day they have a new one. They've been talking about nocturnal paintings, painting in the nighttime, and I keep meaning to click on it and watch one. But look how warm these old-fashioned incandescent light bulbs are. How warm and glowy. It's kind of like Thomas Kincaid. You know, he would always put a warm, glowy light in his houses. And that was very effective. It draws people in. It's cozy. It makes you feel like you want to go there. Like, you know, going on my road trip the other day, we saw all kinds of little grocery stores like this. It makes you want to stop and get a bologna sandwich, you know. This is an artist named G. Harvey, and the evening glowy gaslight hour. And then this cool sky against it. This again is complementary colors, orange and blue, and it's backlit. So position yourself if you're taking pictures. I do that a lot. I'll take the baby out in the afternoons, late evening. She has golden blonde hair right now, and I'll get down in the grass, chiggers and all, and I'll throw something and make her go in the distance so the light is backlit her hair, and I get some of the best pictures. So backlighting is always a wonderful tool. Look at the colors in the snow. Lavender, blues up here. The horse, these shadow areas on the horse are very cool tones for the most part. Not just black. Don't get your black out and just put some kind of flat black on there. And here's another nighttime painting. And look at how golden and orange the light is. And it's just jumping around everywhere in this painting. And then my last two images of the flowers being, it's so, so important. Take your time, plan these things out. If you have to go back to that same spot every afternoon and just put down color notes or write down color notes, do it. It'll show in your work. It'll make all the difference. All right, I'm just a few minutes behind, but that's my little segment on lighting. Any thoughts or questions or observations while I'm pulling up the other one? Please jump in there. I know you guys have experience with this, so I
I
want to
have
hear.
not ever tried doing color notes, but that makes so much sense. I think that's one of the big things I picked up this morning.
Oh, good, good. Even if, you're not like, sometimes I'll have a model and I don't get anywhere near finished, but before the clock, the timer buzzes, I go back and I just put spots where I don't want to forget that beautiful glow on her cheek, because I know my photo won't show it. And so I'll just, even if you did them along on a piece of paper or you did them along the edge and made a little note as to what you saw. Most plein air painters will do that because they're just doing a quick study. They're chasing the light. They're fighting with shadows. And so they're trying to grab the best, most opportune time. Anything else? Thank you, Carol, for that. So happy that I can show you something new.